This episode is supported by Soss Door Hardware, makers of the Invisible Hinge. Soss, strong, beautiful, invisible. I'm hanging the doors on this cabinet using the Soss Invisible Hinge. It's really a super nice hinge, just has a very clean look to it. And I'll need to mortise into the stiles and I'll need to mortise into the doors. And I think the best way to do that is to first cut the mortise into the stiles before I attach the stiles to the cabinet. Before I start cutting the mortise, I need to cut the doors the same length as the stiles. So I've set up a stop block on my crosscut sled. Well, as you can see, I've already hung one of the doors, and that's because I really just wanted to figure this out before I tried to figure it out and shoot a video at the same time. And this is definitely one of those things where you want to measure twice and cut once. In fact, I hung a piece of scrap first just to kind of get warmed up with the whole process. So you probably also noticed that I've got a walnut veneer on the birch plywood. I ended up veneering the front of the doors. If you have walnut plywood, that's probably a faster solution. I happen to have the veneer and not the plywood, so that's why I veneered the doors. So now that I've got everything figured out, let's go over to the workbench and we'll hang the next door. The first thing I'm doing is labeling the stile and the door. You want to make whatever mental note that you need just to make sure you don't get confused when you're taking the doors in and out of the cabinet. The first thing I want to point out is both the stile and the door are exactly the same length. Next, I'll place the jig for the Soss number 204 hinge and rotate the stop and slide the jig until the stop hits the end of the stile. I've clamped the jig in place, and next I'll remove the set screws and use my plunge router to cut the shallow mortise. I've set the plunge router to 1/4 inch for the first mortise. Now I'll reinstall the set screws and adjust the depth of my plunge router to 3/4 inch. With the first mortise complete, I'll move the jig to the other side of the stile and repeat the process. Now I'll move on to the door, and again I'll slide the jig in place until the stop hits the end of the door. I should point out that I added a board to the bottom of the jig to make it easy to clamp the jig in place with a pair of squeeze clamps. To learn more about the jig that I'm using, I'll have a link in the description to a video I made last year that goes into more detail. Now that I have the mortises cut, I'll fit the door to the cabinet by trimming off 1/8 inch off the bottom of the door and 1/8 inch off the top. When installing the hinge, I like to use a self-centering drill bit to pre-drill holes for the screws. Before I can attach the stile to the cabinet, I'll need to pre-drill and countersink holes, and for that I'll use the drill press. After fitting all the doors a little light, I'll remove them and add the iron-on walnut edge banding. Okay, well, I am really happy with the way these doors turned out. I think the clean look of the invisible hinge really adds a lot to the design, and I'm really happy to have this part of the project behind me because the next part is really pretty simple. I'll just be veneering the sides, the top, and then adding the finish, and hopefully I'll be able to wrap this project up by next week. As always, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you soon.